NotionWave podcast episode Who the Hell Knows? Actually, I do. It's episode 8. Welcome to episode 8 of NotionWave podcast. And in this episode, we are talking about the art of repetition. How does one become an expert at anything? By carefully observing the act, or through studying it in the books? Some might argue that people are born with some capabilities which make them good at certain things. This conjecture will make Charles Darwin quite angry. After all, it was him who proved Lamarck wrong and told the world that acquired traits cannot be inherited. So, we are back at our question. How does one become an expert at something? The simple answer is through repetition. We humans are natural born mimics. This statement will also make Darwin very angry. The thing is, nobody is born with a set of traits that make them an expert at certain thing. Granted, genetics might favor some individuals more than the others. Like, a heavyweight person whose genetics allow him to put on more muscle mass will surely be better suited for certain contact sports like wrestling, as compared to someone whose genetics prevent him from putting on a substantial muscle mass. But it is not genetics that tip off the balance in favor of somebody so that they can come out on the top as the winner. It's their knowledge that they have gathered over the years and their technique which they have mastered by practicing it every day. This is exactly why wrestling contenders are always matched with their respective weight categories so as to get rid of genetic unfairness that might come into play when a heavy fighter fights with a lighter one. So, the answer boils down to practice. The more someone practices something, the more they get the hang of it, and if we dig deeper into this phenomenon, we shall find that practice is nothing more than repetition. A set of coordinated activities that a person does over and over again in order to become better at certain thing over time. Practice makes a man perfect. Perfection is the outcome of expertise, and expertise comes from repetition. So, in turn, repetition induces perfection in a person. So, if repetition is what makes a person an expert at something, then why does it get a bad rap from people around the world? Did not catch my drift? Consider this example. You failed in a class and now you have to repeat it for another year. Are you not worried about your friends or your classmates' perception of you? Well, we might come around the solution for this problem by the phenomenon that goes something like this. Some infinities are smaller than the others. So, by the properties of transitivity, some repetitions are better than the others. But what separates the good ones from the others? Can someone actually define what is good or what is bad? It's society's perception that provides the definition for it. And the heart of the matter is that society's perceptions change over time. Something which was thought to be bad can be regarded as normal, if not good, at some other time, and vice versa. So, is it the time that one lives in which draws the line between good or bad? Taking a microscopic and individualistic view of time, one can see how perception changes relative to it. Repeating a class because you failed seemed to be a shame when you were in school, but it becomes a common practice when you reach college. Granted, it's not the one to boast about. Nonetheless, it becomes something for which you no longer feel ashamed. I could also argue that it is not the society's perception that changes, but the person actually adapts to the situation to the point that they no longer feel ashamed for failing the class, just because it has been done many a times in their lifetime. This is another example of repetition that causes you to be an expert at something, and in this case, failure. But let's be honest, this is not realistic at all. But at the same time, I think we can all agree that repetition actually induces perfection inside of a person. Regardless if it is good or bad, it is also an art that is difficult to master. I say it's difficult because hard work and frustration are its byproducts. It's not in a man's nature to repeat something with pleasure. Repetition often requires an everlasting will to overcome the inner conflict that comes with the thought of repeating a task that couldn't be done perfectly in the first go. The sense of failure needs to be set aside, and that is the hardest thing to do. On the other hand, good repetitions are bound to give you pleasure. They are the ones which a person makes their habit and introduces them in their daily routine. Both the terms represent repetitions that induce pleasure in their doing, but not all pleasure-inducing repetitions are on the good side of the spectrum. Addiction, for example, is bad from all angles. No matter what a person might be addicted to, it's mostly bad. Addiction happens because it induces pleasure. So, once again, the line between good and bad repetitions becomes convoluted. But what becomes crystal is that repetition is indeed an art. It's difficult to master, requires lots of effort, and a mindset that is wired to overcome the frustration that comes along with it. And from a macroscopic perspective, repetitions are good. Repetition is the reason for multiple iteration of certain things through which their shortcomings are eliminated. It is because of repetition that the concept of perfection exists. Repetitions are useful, repetitions are powerful, and in the end, repetitions are the basic necessity of society. And thank you for listening to this episode of NotionWave podcast. And don't forget to check out the other episodes from the library. Head over to my blog to find more content, and thank you for tuning in.